The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities that they represent. This program is intended for educational purposes. You're listening to
आप सुन रहे हैं
You're listening to
നിങ്ങൾ കേൾക്കുന്നത്
ನೀವು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ
Radio Azim Premji
ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಿಟಿ
So far in this show, we've seen many moods of Ghalib. We've seen Ghalib the lover. We've seen the mischievous Ghalib making fun of his rivals, getting into battles. Today I want to do something a little different. Ghalib, as I've mentioned before, was considered a Mushkil Pasand poet, meaning a difficulty-loving poet. Now, I don't think it's particularly, Mushkil is not a bad thing. A lot of things in life are worth struggling with and taking the effort to understand and practice. So I thought we can take a deep dive into some selected verses of Ghalib that really illustrate this aspect of his poetry, and I'll break it down for you. So we'll take our time to understand what he's trying to say.
यूं होता तो क्या होता? The World of Ghalib with Amit Basole. Episode 5, The Philosopher.
Let's start with a verse in which Ghalib reflects on his own writing. आगही दाम शुनीदन जिस कदर चाहे बिछाए, आगही दाम शुनीदन जिस कदर चाहे बिछाए, मुद्दा अंका है अपने आलमे तकरीर का. Most likely all Greek and Latin, I'm thinking. In an earlier episode, we saw how Ghalib was accused in his lifetime of writing meaningless verses. And I bet many of you are thinking right now, hey, are you slipping us one of those meaningless verses here, or does this thing even mean anything? Now, as we also saw, Ghalib had strong responses to this allegation. And in fact, this verse is another response of Ghalib to allegations of writing meaningless verses. Let's see how. The key thing in this verse that I'll explain is this word called anka. An anka is a mythical bird. In this tradition, the defining characteristic of the anka bird is that it doesn't exist. Okay, it's an imaginary bird. So of course it can never be caught, naturally. It is unattainable. So what is Ghalib saying? He's saying that no matter how much you try to comprehend the meaning of what I'm saying through intellectual processes, the essence of my meaning is going to escape you. You're never going to capture it fully. Okay? So agahi means intellect. And there's a very nice wordplay here that he has done between the word dam is net, and the fact that anka is a bird. So he's saying dam is shunidan, meaning a net of listening or a net of hearing. No matter how much you spread it about, jis kadar chahe bichhaye. Try hard as you might, the essence, the mudda of what I am saying, of the world of my speech, he says, alame takreer. That mudda is like the anka bird. It'll escape you. So if you want to be postmodern about it, you can say discourse doesn't limit meaning. Right? You can never fully say things. You can never fully hear them. As always, the idea is of course wonderful, but it's expressed in such a delightfully poetic way. Incidentally, this verse is part of the first ghazal in Ghalib's Diwan. And it's the same ghazal that has that other verse that we looked at in a previous episode when we were talking about his difficulty-loving nature, the one about bringing the river of milk from the mountain. It's the same ghazal. So Ghalib packed a lot of really difficult ones in the very first poem of his book, and therefore you can see how he got the reputation that he did. One final thing I'll say about this, Ghalib's intellectual guru, Bedil, has a very similar verse, and I'm not going to tell you the verse in the original because it's Persian, but I'll just give you a loose translation. Bedil says, "As long as there's poetry in this world, I am going to exist. No one can erase me. Why? Because my speech is like the wings of the Anka bird." So again, the Anka, the idea that what I'm saying, you'll keep coming back to, you'll never fully capture. Now that we have, gotten a bit of a appetite for reading the difficult Ghalib, the Ghalib beyond the Dil-e Nadan, you can call him, right? So now let's take another example. This verse is again going to have a bunch of difficult words, so stay with me and we will unpack it. He says, "है गैब गैब जिसको समझते हैं हम शुहूद, है गैब गैब जिसको समझते हैं हम शुहूद, हैं ख्वाब में हनूज जो जागे हैं ख्वाब में, हैं ख्वाब में हनूज जो जागे हैं ख्वाब में." Hanuz in the second line just means still. Okay, so keep that in mind. So this verse should be seen in a long line of metaphysical verses. It's metaphysical poetry by Bedil and many other people who went before Ghalib. These poets use poetic techniques to communicate a metaphysical idea. And what is that idea here? That which is present and visible, the shuhud, जिसको हम देख सकते हैं, it hides that which is absent or invisible, but real. So that which is visible is not the true reality, it hides true reality. I'm sure you have encountered this idea somewhere or the other before. And many poets, Ghalib and others, have written poems about this. So let's see how is he trying to communicate this idea. There's a peculiar construct in the first line, ghaib-e-ghaib. Ghaib means hidden. Okay? So ghaib-e-ghaib could mean the hiddenest of all hidden things, or something that is hidden within something that is hidden, or it could mean that the fact that something is hidden has itself been hidden. Okay, so all of these are possible interpretations of ghaib-e-ghaib. As you can see in the first phrase, your head is probably going to start spinning, right? But let's keep going and see, and I think we will be rewarded if we keep going. So the first line, what could he be saying? We can think straightforwardly. He is saying what we think is the present visible world is the hiding of that which is hidden. Okay, that is ultimate reality. But we are speaking of Ghalib, so some more convoluted interpretations are probably worth thinking about. He probably had them in mind too. Could he be saying that by making the world witnessable or visible, the Creator has truly hidden reality in plain sight, as it were? Right? Because the hiddenest of all hidden things are the ones that are actually visible for all to see. Because then we don't even know that there is anything to be searched for. Think about it. Right? Think about hiding something in plain sight. Maybe that's what Ghalib means by this ghaib-e-ghaib, jisko hum samajhte hain shuhud. Right? We are thinking that something is visible and in sight for us to see, but actually it is the hiding of the hidden thing. Now, all these interpretations are consistent with what he is saying, and indeed one of the qualities of this poetry is that poets try hard to preserve as many meanings as possible. I'll give you a fantastic example of this later in this episode, of multiple meanings. My own favorite meaning here, though, is the last one which I mentioned, which is the hiding in plain sight aspect. That the fact of hiddenness is something which has been hidden by making the world manifest. But of course, to each his own. Ghalib doesn't insist that we take it one way or the other. The interesting thing about how he has done this is that the first line could mean multiple things, and the second line will work with any interpretation of the first line. So the second line is kind of like an illustration of the first. What is he saying? People who are in a dream and see themselves as having woken up in the dream are still in a dream. Okay? So to wake up in a dream is not real waking up, he's saying. Hai khwab mein, jo jage hai khwab mein. Now there's a nice wordplay here also, because khwab in Persian means both dream and sleep. Okay? Although in Urdu we have come to take it only in the meaning of dream, but here both meanings do work. So those who have woken up in a dream think that they have woken up, but they are mistaken. Just as those who take the visible world to be the real world are mistaken. But here's the thing, they are not completely off the mark either. Waking up in a dream is a kind of like a shadow of waking up for real. It's not a completely different thing, right? It's just not real, but it's like it. It's sort of adjacent to the real thing. In the same way that the knowledge of the real world is not completely different from the one that is manifest. So they are both in the same family, so to speak, waking up. One is waking up in a dream, one is waking up for real. One is thinking that the real world is really all that I see around me and that's it, there's nothing more. But the other is to know that there's something beyond it. So to wake up for real is to recognize the hiddenness that is referred to in the first line. I'm sure if you think more on this verse, you will see a few more things in it, such as the nature of this poetry, that you have to kind of let it sit with you for a while.
But to get the entire world to agree on this one thing in the time that it was, when zero actually was shaped up, I cannot get my head around the fact that everyone just agreed.
It took centuries to have this transition.
Unlike place value system, where there were at least 4 different civilizations that sort of said, hey, this is one way.
It was just us.
Wow. It was just us who said, hey, let there be nothing also in the scheme of things. Before you get to something, many things, let's start with nothing. That's amazing.
It's a math world with Divakaran. Coming soon only on Radio Azim Premji University.
The big theme of existence and non-existence, that which is visible, that which is hidden, which we just saw in the previous verse, this theme is a perennial one in philosophy. For thousands of years, people have been reflecting on the nature of being. What is being? What is nothingness? Are they the same thing? Why does something exist? What does it mean for nothing to exist? These questions have been with humanity for centuries, right? And thousands of years. Ghalib is coming in a long line of poets, thinkers, philosophers in India and elsewhere who have talked about this in many different interesting ways. In fact, we also know that via Bedal, who was quite familiar with Vedantic thought and had in fact even done Persian versions of Sanskrit texts, he had written Persian poems inspired by Sanskrit texts. Via Bedal, Ghalib was also familiar with Vedantic thought. So the ideas of Indian philosophy on what is existence, what is non-existence, were working somewhere in Ghalib's mind and producing brilliant poetic expressions. And I want to give you one such example now. Hasti hai na kuch adam hai Ghalib. Hasti is existence and Adam is non-existence. Okay? Hasti hai na kuch Adam hai Ghalib. Aakhir tu kya hai, nahi hai. You are neither existence nor non-existence, Ghalib. After all, what are you, O you who are not? If you notice, he has turned nahi hai into a kind of a mode of, it's a noun, it's like somebody's name. Somebody's name is nahi hai, is not. O you who are not, what are you? Right? Now, nearly all the commentators who have talked about this verse have described this verse as mischievous, referring to this clever way in which he addresses something that does not exist as a nahi hai. Note that the word hai or is, which signifies existence of something, is used 4 times in this really small verse. You can see why Frances Pritchett, in her commentary on this verse, says, and I quote, "This verse sets up what must be close to a maximum amount of paradox in what must be close to the fewest possible words." This idea of existence, non-existence, something beyond, being beyond both, has been around with us for thousands of years. And here's an example of it. The Rig Veda has a very famous hymn called the Creation Hymn. Even non-existence was not there, nor existence. There was no air, there was no space. Before anything was created, there was nothing. Not existence, nor non-existence. Same idea, in fact. This very creation hymn from the Rig Veda is what some of you may recall in the old Doordarshan serial Bharat Ek Khoj. Was used in the titles in both Sanskrit and in Hindi translation. Indeed, if I just stretch that Rigvedic connection a little bit more, Ghalib seems to be channeling the perplexity of the Rigvedic thinkers actually, because that same creation hymn ends with those guys just throwing up their arms saying, I don't know what to say about this. They say,
वही सचमुच में जानता या नहीं भी जानता है किसी को नहीं पता नहीं पता नहीं है पता नहीं है पता.
Whence all creation had its origin, the Creator, whether He fashioned it or whether He did not, the Creator who surveys it from the highest heaven, He knows, or maybe even He does not know. Right? If you remember, the Hindi translation went, hai usko pata ya usko bhi nahi pata. So nobody knows, not even the person who made this thing knows the secret of this thing. And Ghalib has captured this perplexity in these very, very few words. I've saved Ghalib's most famous existence, non-existence verse for the last of my examples. न था कुछ तो खुदा था, कुछ न होता तो खुदा होता. न था कुछ तो खुदा था, कुछ न होता तो खुदा होता. डुबोया मुझको होने ने, न होता मैं तो क्या होता. This is an incredible verse and is justly considered one of Urdu poetry's most famous verses. It is very simple in its creation. Sahle Mumtana, as they call it, an unattainably simple verse. The kind of verse that makes you think, I could do that, but you can't. It uses no fancy Persian words at all, but it packs many meanings into its 2 lines. And is it a coincidence that it was written when Ghalib was 50 years old and had returned to writing Urdu poetry after writing in Persian for many years? Remember, we talked about how he wrote very difficult poems when he was young, and then he says to his friend, I became older and I started writing simpler things. Well, this is one of those verses when he wrote when he was an older man. Frances Pritchett calls this verse a meaning machine, and she gives many interpretations. I won't give you all of those here. You can go to her website and check them out. I'll just point out a few tricks that Ghalib is doing here that make many meanings possible. Okay? न था कुछ तो खुदा था, कुछ ना होता तो खुदा होता. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? If you know basic Hindi, you think, when there was nothing, God was there. If nothing were to be there, if nothing were to exist, well, God would exist. Right? That's an obvious one. But now think about the fact that in Hindi and Urdu, you can always leave the subject of a sentence off, implied. And if I tell you that the subject of this sentence is मैं, then how does the line read? न था कुछ तो खुदा था, कुछ ना होता तो खुदा होता. मैं जब कुछ नहीं था तो मैं खुदा था, और अगर मैं कुछ नहीं होता तो मैं खुदा होता. Immediately the line has changed its flavor, right? And the meaning is right there to be had, right? Similarly, the second line, डुबोया मुझको होने ने, ना होता मैं तो क्या होता. Multiple meanings are possible. Being, existing was my downfall. That's the first part of the line. डुबोया मुझको, very colloquial. इसने तो मुझे डुबो दिया. It destroyed me. What destroyed me? Existing. If I were not to exist, then what would I be? The clue is in the first line. Or, if I were not to be me, then what would I be? Right? Both are possible. ना होता मैं तो क्या होता, यानी मैं अगर मैं नहीं होता, or if I did not exist. Both are possible. But that's not the end of it. क्या होता, the last bit, again you can make it out to be what would I be, or so what. Think about it. Just so what. Na main hota to kya hota? What if I hadn't existed? What would have happened? Well, presumably nothing much. So all of these meanings can be put together in different combinations, and you will get a bunch of different moods out of the same verse. He's playing with very simple language tricks to say something profound, but also something that is entertaining, don't you think? I mean, it's a heavy idea, and I hope that all the verses that we've looked at, all of these are heavy, but they're also so fun. And if you think back to what I said in the first episode, all of these are metrically tight poems, meaning you can sing them. If they are in meter, they are in rhyme, you can rap them out, you can sing them in ghazal form, you can sing them in qawwali form. So he's done all of this thinking and expressing while constrained tightly by the poetic form. I've only scratched the surface in this very tightly edited podcast time that we've got. I encourage you to go out on your own, look at online resources. We've put a few in the show notes as always, and there's a lot out there for you to discover on your own. So until next time, bye for now.
That was episode 5, The Philosopher. Make sure you check out the show notes where we share the show resources and acknowledgements, and don't forget to subscribe or follow our channel for future episodes. On the next episode...
Adis by Ghalib.
Oh!
कितने अजीम शख्स और कितने अजीम शायर थे, और मिर्जा गालिब करने की वजह से उर्दू में मेरी तालीम शुरू हुई सही मानों में.
दिले नादान तुझे हुआ क्या है, आखिर इस दर्द की दवा क्या है.
को है उनसे वफा की उम्मीद जो जानते नहीं वफा क्या है.
You're listening to...
आप सुन रहे हैं.
You're listening to
सुनो था. ನೀವು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ.
Radio
Radio Azim Brainji
University.